Howdy. Make it stick. Jumping in to Anki. What are the 8 sections of Chapter 3 makes up your practice? The myth of massed practice, spaced practice, interleaved practice, varied practice, developing discrimination skills, improving complex mastery for medical students. These principles are broadly applicable. The takeaway. Boom. What are the 6 sections of Chapter 6 get beyond learning styles? Active learning from the get-go. Successful intelligence. Structure building, rule versus example learning. The takeaway, I'm missing one. Active learning from the get-go, successful intelligence. Dynamic testing, structure building, rule versus example learning. The takeaway, we missed dynamic testing. Oops. Cool. Incorrect though. So, what are the 6 sections of Chapter 6 get beyond learning styles? Active learning from the get-go. Successful intelligence, dynamic testing, structure building, rule versus example learning, the takeaway. Okay. All right, so what did we read about yesterday? Make it stick. Okay, well, we're reading still about Bruce Hendry, right? This anecdotal story, the character of this chapter. But we did take, I recalled that all yesterday. That's more of the story. So I'm not going to recall a ton of the story today. But the main takeaways from that would be, first we asked the question of what are these differences in learning that actually are important that lead to differences in learning outcomes. First of all, the first one that the authors mention is basically your propensity to take responsibility for your own learning, your own education. And this is shown through Bruce Hendry and his experimentation and trying things and trying new things, and taking responsibility, not saying, oh, that's this other person's responsibility to teach me. It's my responsibility to learn what I need to learn and what I want to learn. Cool. So taking responsibility of your own education, knowledge, and learning. This is the first difference that in learning styles, not styles, but a difference in learning approach or personality that ends up leading to differences in learning outcomes. Number 2, the second difference is going to be essentially rule building / structure building / rule learning. And this is basically through experience, you distill down these core rules or patterns like lessons. So you go through your life and you have these experiences and you draw meaning and lessons from the experience, and you kind of get rid of all the extraneous details that don't matter as much, and you're like, well, this is, you make up a rule about what happened. You kind of induce a pattern you find. An example to make this more concrete is Bruce Hendry was he had a fourplex and trying to make money, and he realized it's all this headache and tons of work and managing people and trying to find tenants and raise prices without getting the tenants to leave. And he ended up just throwing it out and saying, real estate's too much work. It's not worth it for making money. That was his kind of rule building or rule learning. Now, I think there's some setbacks. Obviously, there's hasty generalizations. There's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And there's just incorrect rules and structures that you can build from experience. However, the authors say that rule building and rule learning and structure building, these lead to better learning outcomes than people that just take experience at their raw value. Because if you just take experience at its raw value or its face value, there's too much details. It's really going to be meaningless. And you can start to find patterns between experiences if you do this rule learning and structure building. So I think that's everything I took notes on. Quick little recall. Yeah? Cool. So what I'm going to do now is continue to read about Bruce Hendry's story. and how he kind of exemplifies the ideas of this chapter. So I'll be back in a bit. I could recall what I read about him. Basically tried, I'll make it super short. He tried all these different ways of making money. Things worked, some things didn't work. He found these rules and lessons along the way. And right up to where we are is he's meeting this guy that's back in the 70s or 80s, got this basically bond arbitrage scheme or strategy. It's not really a scheme. It's a legit strategy that people used back then to make money through low risk bond investments, from basically finding the true value of the company's assets versus the bond price when a company's in financial trouble, and being like, okay, well, there's actually more assets than there are the bond's price. So there's going to be money for the bonds to the bondholders, the creditors, to get paid out. So, all right, I'm going to continue reading now. I'll be back in a bit to recall. All right, guys, welcome. Not welcome. I just read a lot more of the section called Active Learning from the Get-Go. We finished up Bruce Hendry's story. It actually got pretty remarkable by the end. He ended up becoming very good at the assessing values of the suffering or failing companies, and got to know about the actual asset value better than anyone else. Eventually became so good at it that he was like promoted to CEO of many of the companies that came out of bankruptcy to help finish the liquidation, and probably became very wealthy with how many successful basically bond arbitrage purchases he did, and he became CEO of many companies. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, so really this chapter, I think it's all about learning differences between people that end up mattering, that do matter. And they say that the learning style and learning preferences really doesn't, whether you're a visual or a verbal learner, that doesn't really matter. But things like what we already talked before about do matter. And we learned about another one, which is another learning difference that matters, is how we view ourselves and our abilities. And these are very, very important learning differences, that differences in our way of seeing the world, ourselves, and our abilities, our beliefs about our abilities, changes drastically the approaches we take to learning, what we decide to try to learn, what we think we can or can't do. So there was this section in there kind of about like, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right, and kind of everything behind that. A little bit of Carol Dweck's research on mindset, stories of all these dyslexic people that ended up doing very poorly in school but becoming very successful outside of school, as well as about people that were not that great at their sport, but ended up becoming great managers or coaches. So yeah, these narratives, the personal stories, as well as our beliefs about abilities, these are big differences that lead to differences in learning outcomes. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. I will talk to you guys later. See ya.